All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and show you just live real quick how to change a carburetor, show you how quick and easy it is. This is a 2012 Polaris 400 HO. They're not necessarily that hard to get to everything. I just wanted to kind of show you real quick how to do it. Hopefully it should only take about 45 minutes or so if you guys want to stick around for that long. But we're going to go ahead and take off basically some of our front plastics here. Not necessarily the front plastics, I mean, but take off the air intake. We should be able to get to everything without necessarily taking off a lot of the front. But let me just kind of show you real quick. We'll get started. Taking the airbox off that goes to it. It's the airbox top that goes to it. And then you do have a mounting bar that goes across. Most things on this thing is going to be around a 10 to a size 12. Let's see here, we'll figure out the sizes together. That's a 12 for the front mounting bracket. All right, and you got 2 Phillips on the front here. We're just going to take off slowly to get to everything. After we take off the bracket in the front here, the next step is we have the side cover. It's a little bit harder to see on that side. I'll actually take you over here for a quick second. We have bolt here, bolt on that side. There's 2 Phillips. On this other side, behind this plastic here is an intake. And we're going to want to remove this to be able to get to the side of the carburetor and everything that's in it. I'm trying not to do it with taking the front plastics off because that's just a pain. It takes a lot longer to get everything done, and a lot of people that want to work on these things or change the carburetors never want to change this stuff in the front, or at least remove it, even though it does make it a little bit easier. But a lot of the times you actually can work through the front here if you just basically take out the airbox. So that's what I'm going to try to show you guys, just taking out the front, or at least the back of the airbox without taking off the whole front plastics, because that's what most people don't ever want to do, is take off all front plastics, especially on a little bit newer models. They tend to be a pain in the you-know-what. So let me go ahead and show you guys here on the airbox. We'll get it taken out. Bear with me for a second, guys. I'm trying to grab some magnets here. That way we can be able to hold on to all of our bolts and everything that we're working with. So we'll go ahead and change back out. Should be a size 10 for the mounting bolts for your airbox. All right, mounting bolts for the airbox off. Go ahead and grab a flathead. I'm gonna have to go to my box real quick. But we're gonna grab a flathead, that way we can take the air filter off. And then after we take the air filter off, we should be able to take and twist. I'll show you if you come in here. Take this off here. This boot here, we should be able to remove our two hoses connected to it and be able to pull everything out if we disconnect this entirely. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Let's just make it easier on everybody. We have a Phillips, or a flathead here. I'm sorry, flathead, not a Phillips. Back out, give you a little bit better view. So this is the intake boot coming from our airbox, going to the carburetor. That's what we're going to go ahead and loosen up. After that, I'm going to go ahead and grab us, or we should all grab to a point, a plier, whether it be needle nose or flathead. I'm sorry, not a needle nose or flathead, but a needle nose. Or just really anything to be able to pry off our 2 intake hoses. It's just a simple clamp. That's all it is as far as our intake hoses. Come over here, guys. That way I give you all a little bit better lighting. We are doing this in the middle of the night. You can hear the dogs going off. We got coyotes and a bunch of animals here. We got to protect them to a point. Heck, we even got some chickens in the shop right now. You know, might even hear them every now and then cackle or chirp to a point. All right, once we have those removed, we should be able to then just lift up our whole box, remove it, and that's how you take out the air box. So we'll just set this to the side. All right, now that it's set to the side, I'll show you guys what it's looking like here. So here's a carburetor here. What we're going to want to do is go ahead and basically take the fuel or turn the fuel off. So we'll go over here to this side here. There should be a fuel petcock valve. Unless it's on the other side on this model. Well, fuel pump's there. Yeah, alright, well, let's go ahead and take it off. We shouldn't have it leaking since it's a fuel pump system. Alright, so we'll take you back around here. We're going to take the fuel lines off to the carburetor. I'll show you guys in there. This is your fuel line here. So that's what we'll take off. May even have to put a new fuel line on there. It looks like it's leaking just slightly. It's kind of hard here for me to set up the camera so that way y'all guys can see. But there we go. All right, so we're going to take the fuel line, which is right down here. You can usually use needle nose for most of them. Sometimes you do need to go ahead and grab just a regular old pair of pliers. Sometimes needle nose, you got to get in there at an angle and it's not going to be the greatest. All right, yeah, that fuel line is a little old and gummy. So what we're going to need to do is just pull it off once we get it. There's also an inline fuel filter that we'll need to change out as well. Those inline fuel filters, a lot of times, they're really small, really hard to see. But down in here, a little bit further, sorry, try to hold the camera straight. You can see the next, can't get it to, there we go. The next clip, and right here, where my finger's at, is another fuel filter. And a lot of times people don't see that those fuel filters are down in there, and they can end up clogging your machine and can be the cause of why it's bogging down or just not running very good or running rough. So we'll go ahead and take you back around to the other side so you get a little bit better view. All right. All right. There we go. Give you a little bit better view. And so down in here, you actually have a Phillips. That's your next clamping point, basically, for your carburetor. That's going to go to the actual intake valves and to your whole intake system. That's the carburetor. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this guy here. Looks like someone's trying to mess with this carburetor before. That's why we're trying to replace it, because they try to clean it and it didn't work, and I ain't going behind somebody else. We're just going to replace it so we don't have to worry about it. All right, so we'll get it loose. All right, we got it loose. Beautiful. Next step is get our mounting bracket loose. One screw there. That's the front facing bracket for the carburetor. Now that it's loose, popper free. All right, now that she's pop free, we're going to work on the other two lines. You have two more lines on the carburetor in the front. One here, and the other one on the other side. Take our pliers, pull those clamps up, push up on the hoses. Right. One hose is off. We're good. Go ahead and take the two back off. All right, perfect. Now that we have all the hoses off, all that's left to do is your throttle and your choke. Let's see if we can pull it out a little bit more. There we go. So the first thing we'll do is the throttle, and then we'll move to the choke. Throttle's fairly simple. We're just gonna go ahead and come back over here. Grab our Phillips. We'll come to the throttle cover here. This is the original carburetor for this Polaris Sportsman. It's one of those Mikuni carburetors. They're great carburetors. It's just, you know, when things are mistreated over a certain period of time and years, they just tend to go to crap. And that's I mean, what are you gonna expect? You know, like what's that old saying? If you don't move your body will fail on you or die or whatever the heck it is. I don't know. All right, and once we get this cover off, this is something that's kind of fun, but it's really not that hard actually. Well, let's just throw it. But we do have new carburetor to put on, so I can throw it all I want because I don't need that anymore. All right, so once we get into the carburetor, if you can see here, you have your actual throttle. When you push up on your throttle, you have a cable that connects to your brass piece that holds on to your actual throttle cable. Just grab any kind of, got a Phillips flathead. You want to pry it out of there. I might need to grab a flathead, but let's see here. Basically, push it with your finger, grab the slack of the cable, bring it up. I hope you guys can see that. But you bring it up where it's nice and loose. Once it's nice and loose, oh, that just popped out. I'm sorry, I was trying to show you a little bit better, but once it's nice and loose and it pops out, if you have a new carburetor, you don't have to worry about it. If you have an old carburetor and just trying to clean it, you want to keep it. So we'll put that off to the side, and then after that, you'll need to pry up. I think this is a size 8. Let me see here. I think I'll grab a wrench, y'all. I believe it's a size 8. Let me double check. It may be like a little bit different, but yeah, it's a size 8. Wait, I'm stupid. That's righty-tighty. All right, we're gonna go ahead and loosen our throttle cable. All right, once our throttle cable is started, well, all right, let me grab the wrench again, and we'll just Just basically going to keep loosening it. A lot of stuff when you're working on small stuff like this takes time. It's just, it is what it is. Get in a nice comfortable position. And just be ready to keep turning your wrench. The next after this is the choke cable. That's the last thing that we need to take off, which is great. Sorry guys. I'm sorry guys. It's part of it when you're sitting here turning the wrenches. Sometimes it just takes forever to get something loose, especially like something simple like a throttle cable going to a carburetor. But it's part of it. Just give it time. Just give it time. Like I said, I wanted to try to do this video in like, heck, I don't know, like 45 minutes or less to kind of show you guys. It's not necessarily too hard, but of course, I'm sure it'll push like to the hour and a half, because that's the way it works when we're working on everything. All right, so the last thing we have now is the choke cable that's left. And a lot of times these are like 12s or 14s, but let me grab a 12 here to get started. Do we have a 12? Yes, we have a 12. Look at that. Just a table of wonders. All right, so this is a thing right here. Y'all guys can see, it's really hard to get to that right there. Let's see if I have enough. Oh, did I have enough? Did I have enough room here? I don't know if I had enough room. Sometimes these chokes can be really, really hard. Did I get it loose? Oh, thank goodness I got it loose. Okay, so quick tip. With chokes being like this right here, see how that's a really tight area to get in. Sometimes when they're tightened at factory, you can't really get anything in there to get it. So I just want to give you a word of advice. If you ever have a situation like that where it's tight and you can't get that actual choke cable off, whatever it may be, you can, so grab a flathead, and you need to make sure that this is in a space that's not going to move. And what you're going to do is just simply grab your flathead, put it to the edge here, and you need your carburetor in a place that's not going to move. Put it on the edge right here, and you take a mallet or a hammer, and you tap it right there. And what you're going to do is eventually keep hitting it, and it's going to break that bead to where you can then go ahead and sit there and turn it by hand. Because I had a video that a lot of people were saying, oh, take the bowl of the carburetor off. It's not that hard to take off, so on and so forth. Well, when you get into a situation like this with your choke, there's nothing I can take off here to make it easier to get to this. Make it easier to get to this piece here. And so now that I popped it loose, I'm just trying to hold it while I'm turning it, because it's hard to just grab it by your fingers and just sit there and keep turning it. Let's see. So I've already got it started and I already got it loose, but like, look at this, see? I can't get the wrench in there to really loosen it or do anything. So now it's just basically by hand. Or you can grab a smaller, let's see here, was that an 8? Oh, look at that. There we go. And this up here will spin free of this. All right, perfect. All right, so now that we have the old carburetor out, and if you can tell, when you dump carburetors over, it should have fuel dumping out. I ain't got nothing dumping out of this guy here. So we'll go ahead and grab our new carburetor. All right, boys and gals. This is an aftermarket carburetor. It's kind of generic to a lot of Polarises. So it'll work with a lot of them, but it's just a cheap one that you can get online. So the next step is basically to repeat the process. So you can see here we have our same choke cable. We'll grab our 12 wrench here, and then better not to tighten this down. But of course, when you're working with this stuff, that's what they're gonna do. Okay guys, well, guess what? We're gonna end up doing exactly what I just talked about. that I didn't necessarily want to do is I'm going to have to take my flathead here because I don't have any room to put a wrench in there. I'm going to have to take my flathead here and pop that loose. So I just want to bring you over to this table real quick. That way I can actually do that. So we'll see here if I can do this without having to grab a real hammer. So grab your flathead, put it here. Sorry, I can't give y'all very good light. I might have to grab a hammer for it. There you go. See? Look at that. And that's the most annoying thing about these carburetors is they'll have this on there tight where you can't do anything about it, but now I can turn it. So let me go ahead and bring it back over here to the four-wheeler. And we'll get started again with what we basically just left off of, with putting the choke back in. After I just kind of showed you guys real quick what you can do as far as a trick if you can't get a wrench on this. So we're taking the new choke out. The first thing we're going to add to it is the new choke. All right, so spring pops out, choke, set that on our magnet tray. And it's sitting in there if you can see it. Sometimes you got to get a needle nose. Other times you can pop it out in your hand. So now that it's popped out in our hand, set the carburetor to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and replace this old choke to the new choke, because if you see, they're slightly different, and this one is not going to match up necessarily to our new one. So what we're going to do is pull the spring back, grab your old one out, throw it to the side. Old spring, throw it to the side. All right. Now, new spring, new choke end. All right, now that that's in there, we'll grab our new carburetor. There's the choke hole there. Pop her in. Get it to an area where I can get it started. Sometimes these can be fickle to get started. Real fickle. What I'm going to do is grab my size 8 here, get it started. I'm going to push while turning, hold it, push while turning. Ooh, this one's being a pest. All right, we're just trying to get this choke started. We just joined. All right, you know what? We may just have to take the old one off and put the new one on is what we're gonna need to do. So we're going to need to separate. Bam. All right. So like I said, these two pieces actually separate. We'll need to take our new choke off, new cable off, separate. So I don't think the threads, they're a little buggered up. They're just not going on. So boop, we got our new one. Slide it on. Get it started. Do the same thing. I'm going to tighten them together as hard as I can because it makes it easier to get it off in the future. So a mechanic from 8 years, 10 years from now can like, oh yeah, that was a little bit easier to take off, but we'll see. It never works that way. All right, so we're going to put the spring back on our choke cable here. New choke end. Put that on. All right, once we get that on, we'll grab our new carburetor again. There's our choke end right here. Slide her in. Once she's slid in, rotate, get it started. There it goes. Much easier. Grab our size 8 since we have room. Turn it. Get it on there nice and snug. You don't want to over tighten it. All this stuff is just cast and brass, and you can mess it up pretty easily. So just get it nice and snug. Or you don't think it's going to come back off. Nice and snug. Put our cover on there. After that, the next step is for the throttle. All right, so once you find your throttle here, go ahead and stick it through the tube. And you will definitely want to go ahead and get it fully seated in there. You want to go ahead and screw your throttle cable completely into the new carburetor or to your old carburetor for cleaning it, for example. That way you have as much room as far as the cable is concerned to make it a little bit easier to get it on there. And I do have actually... everything's new that we got here, so I'm gonna go grab it. We got the new cover. There we go. All right, perfect. We can go grab that now. All right, now that we got the cover here, I'm gonna go ahead and grab a new throttle cover, new gasket, comes in this kit here, new throttle cover, new gasket. Just pop that in for now. Sometimes it's good having fingernails, other times it's a pain. All right, after that, this right here is what keeps your throttle cable connected. That's what we're looking for. So if you can see, you have your throttle cable piece here. There is a skinny side and there's an open side. So you want the skinny side facing where the cable comes into the carburetor, so that way it just slides over and stays there. All right, now the next step is just hold it up out of the way. Sometimes you want to use a flathead to pry this up, or you can just use your fingers as well. All right, so once you pry it up, hope you guys can see this. Once you pry it up, you place your brass throttle cable holder in its home, basically in its hole. All right, once you place it in there, you're gonna take that cable, you're gonna wrap it over the top of the whole throttle assembly, the whole housing. Oh, it just popped out. I'm sorry. Let me grab a, I gotta, it's behind it right now, that throttle cable. All right, let's do this one more time real quickly. Grab a cable, flat side facing where the cable comes in, opening side facing where the furthest part, or at least the open part. All right, so you put it back in your throttle casing opening, hold it with your finger, pull that slack over, and all you're trying to do is just get that slack to sit in that crease that you have. And once it sits in that crease, you let it down, and as you can see, it's going down. So I would, as soon as you do that, grab your throttle and push it to make sure it's connected good. So that's connected good. So the next step is we're just gonna go ahead and put our cover back on. It comes with new screws, but I'm just gonna use these old screws. There's nothing wrong with these old screws. They're not stripped out, there's no damage to them, so we'll go ahead and screw our cover back on. I'm just gonna get them all started before we tighten them. All right, get started. it started. All right, now that I got them all started, we'll go ahead and just tighten them down nice and firm. Let me go check the dogs' farts. Let me go check on the animals real quick. We're all good. We are all good. All right, so now that we got the cover tightened on, we have throttle cable, everything's tightened on that we like. We're gonna go ahead and lift her up. All right, next step, since everything's a little bit easier to get to, we have a cover here on the cap. There is one single small tube, which is actually goes to your fuel pump, but it's right here. Now, just make sure to pay attention. Earlier, you had seen me taking it off, but it's a small pump right here. I just want to give you a little bit better idea of exactly where it's at. But it is this guy right here. That's the first pump we're going to attach. The next one on this side is going to actually, oh, nope. The next one on this side right here is going to be for your fuel line. So we're going to hook that up next. Here, these two tubes, these clear ones go here and here. And that's for pretty much almost all of your Polaris Sportsmen. They're all very similar as far as the way that they're hooked up and the way that they're set up is exactly like that. Now, I will say on this fuel line, it is a little gummed up. So honestly, I think I'm gonna go ahead and cut off some of that fuel line. So when I run it on the new fuel line, what it should do for me is it shouldn't be as gummy, shouldn't be as loose. So it should hopefully be a little bit tighter on my fuel line to prevent any kind of air gaps, air bubbles, or vacuum issues with the fuel pump and the fuel system itself. So I'm gonna take my clamp and move it back just a little bit more. I'm not gonna cut too much off because I don't have that much slack here. But you can see that it's pretty bubbled. Alright. Just a little bit, like I said. The only reason is because look how bubbled, look how just disformed it is. And that's the main reason. Alright, so after that, I'm gonna go ahead and push our car forward. We're gonna take our fuel cap off on the new carburetor, hook up our fuel line is the next step. You want to get the fuel line especially on there is about as dang near as good as you can get. That's the last line that you want to have any kind of air leak, vacuum leak, so on and so forth. And that's why I cut off the end of the piece of the fuel line, just because you can see how gummy and how just old it was. It was definitely not going to seat very good. All right, the next step here is to hook up the two clear lines like I was talking about earlier. So we'll take our caps off here and then go ahead and hook up our two. Where did you go? There it is. Overflow air lines in the front. The next step is to, and trust me, push hard, is to push the carburetor back into the intake on the intake valve side for the cylinder head. You're gonna have to push really hard. All right, let me come on the outside because that is where the screw's at. And I can see if it's seated a little bit better. All right, so let me show you guys real quick on the seating of it. Sorry, gonna bring this down a little bit. So if you can see in there, that's your intake boot to the cylinder, intake cylinder side to the intake. This right here is your carburetor. You want to make sure to push that and get it seated as best you possibly can. If it's not seated, you will have a vacuum leak and you might have surging to it. But now that I push it forward and have it seated as far as it can go, it is a Phillips. I'm going to go ahead and get started on tightening it. Sorry, don't want to be in all this guy's ways. You know what, I might have to loosen that intake boot up a little bit more and push it in. Now that I'm looking at it. Yeah, we're gonna have to loosen this a little bit more and push it in a little bit more. If you get real close, you can see the casting on your carburetor, and that's really gonna tell you if you're lined up very good or not on your carburetor. Let me push it a little bit more into there so that way it seats a little bit better. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten that intake boot that we have there. What I might actually do, make it a little bit easier, is so right here you have a line going towards your fuel pump. I'm gonna go ahead and take that back off, and that way I can actually get to the flat or the Phillips on my intake boot just a little bit easier. There we go. All right, you're gonna want to tighten this, get it nice and snug now. All right. Let's see if I can tighten a little bit more. All right. So go ahead and reattach our outlet for the fuel pump. Grab a needle nose, pull our clamp down. Perfect. All right, now it's time to go ahead and reattach our airbox to the system. So we have our airbox here. We'll slide her in. The first step is to get it started on your carburetor. It should, if you have it pretty loose as far as your clamp, you should be able to get it on pretty easy without having any issues. Once it's on, you're pretty much almost home to the home stretch. But you have one of your tubes here. Let me make sure you can see that, guys, here on your intake side. Yeah, I'll back out a little bit. So the last steps here on your intake side, let's go ahead and plumb her on. Plumb her on. We'll go ahead and tighten our boot here, going to the carburetor. And this is our boot coming from our air filter to the carburetor that we're tightening now. These are the last steps, and then we're about to turn the machine on and fire her up, see how she sounds. There could be some adjustments we need to make to the carburetor as far as idle. step is this guy here. Basically, these are your overpressure lines. I believe one comes from your transmission, the other one comes from your engine. And they're just excess pressure. They're basically, for evap reasons, return it back to your airbox, and then it goes back to everything else. That's the way it works. All right. Now they got everything back on, we'll add our mounting bracket. I always suggest to get your screws started. They just seem to always be the easiest. And then a lot of times you do have to lift up or adjust your carburetor here. I just want to show you. Lifting up here, getting it started. Beautiful. Once it gets started, we'll grab the other one. Same step. Lift up. Get your bracket in place. Not lining up. There we go. All right, go ahead and get those two tightened up. All right. Go ahead and start these bolts. These two nuts. And your screws. On the airbox as well. These are size 12. Your screws in your airbox are size 10. But we're far enough along now that we should be able to go ahead and turn her over and fire up and see what she does. So let me expand out on the angle here. That way whenever we turn it on, we'll see what it does. All right. So everything's hooked up. We should be good to go. Grab a few things off of here. As far as tools, I just don't want them rattling off and falling off on the ground. Throw everything over here. Everything over here. And it's going to take a second to fire up just simply because there should be no gas in that carburetor. Might be grab my jump box. Alright, let me grab my jump box real quick, boys and gals. Alright, she's fully charged. We have our battery here. Quick connection. Quick connection. Turn her on. We're back in action. Turn the idle down. Also, Polarises have a throttle adjustment up here on the handlebars up here as well. If you didn't know that, if the one down there is fully backed out, they have a throttle adjustment right here on the handlebars. I'd say that's a job well done as far as changing the carburetor. Well, that's the end of the video. Carburetor's changed, machine's running good. So I'll say fair due. We got to change. There goes my jump box. It's okay, but she's running good. All right, fellow viewers, I will see y'all guys later. You can watch the whole thing, but thank you for joining us on Idiots with Tools. Have a good night.